Welcome, Pewter Report readers, viewers, and listeners to a brand new edition of the Pewter Report podcast brought to you by our friends over at Briar-Greaves Insurance. Protecting your assets starts with a company that you can count on. Whether it's auto, homeowners, flood boaters, or business insurance, there's nobody better in business to work with than Briar-Greaves Insurance. For more information, visit briargreavesinsurance.com or give them a call at 813-876-4166. That's 813-876-4166. It is a Thursday edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Our last episode of the week. No Pewter Insider tomorrow because it is the 4th of July tomorrow. So I hope everybody is in a fantastic mood, getting ready for America's holiday. I know we're in a great mood and excited to talk about your Tampa Bay Buccaneers and even more specifically, the Bucs defense. The title of today is, Can the Bucs defense be deadly again? There was once upon a time where this Bucs defense, ran by Todd Bowles, then a defensive coordinator, was harassing Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl in Tampa, making him run for his life and beating Hall of Fame quarterbacks along the way. Last season, not exactly the case, but there were a lot of moves made this offseason that make us believe that maybe, potentially, the Bucs can get back on track on the defensive side. So we'll talk all about it today, answer questions and comments, and, of course, super chats as well. I'm your host, Matt Matera. Joined with me, my fellow Thursday co-host from PewterReport.com, Adam Slavon. Hello, Adam. How are we doing this afternoon?
Matt, we're doing great. It is the eve of America's birthday, so really excited about tomorrow and all the festivities. But right now, talking about this Bucs defense, the topic at hand for today is one I'm really excited about because it's something that we've kind of talked about on Pewter Report. We did our bold takes for 2025, and mine was the Bucs could be a top 10 defense again. And for Todd Bowles, after being extended, I've also made the point that there are no excuses now. And when you look at this defense, Matt, on paper, I think the conversation can begin that the talent is there to be deadly again.
No doubt about it. That was a great story you had about Todd Bowles not having any more excuses. And yes, that was your bold take about the Bucs defense. Mine was about Bucky Irving, but we spent a lot talking about Bucky Irving this offseason. And so we'll spend more time on the defense. But do you want to sum up a little bit what your bold take was in terms of why you believe that this Bucs defense can be a top 10, despite just like the talent itself, and why Todd Bowles has no more excuses?
Yeah, I think when you look at the Bucs being a top 10 defense, the talent obviously is a big factor in that equation. But when you look at Todd Bowles, the defensive play caller, he now finally has the talent to get back to the game plans that he had in 2020 and 2021. And when I look at the 2020 secondary, all the starters were under the age of 25. So after adding Benjamin Morrison, Jacob Parrish, getting some youth there, I think that the secondary will be better. I think the pass rush, it's been consistent, but you're going to see a lot bigger plays made from some bigger names. So I think the combination of the talent and then also Bowles kind of learning from the mistakes of his past 5 years in Tampa, it's really going to allow the defense to get to the next level.
I have a little bit of a theory because Todd Bowles would never say it out loud. There's no reason to cause friction between the team and the front offices and everything of that nature. But I don't know. I have this feeling, we all saw what happened last year with the Bucs secondary in particular, and Bowles spoke about it on the Pewter Report podcast, where he was asked about why does he play so far off the coverage? And what it essentially came down to, whether you heard what Todd Bowles said or you just watched the defense and you saw how players were going in and out the entire time, it just felt like Todd Bowles didn't really believe in the talent, as we mentioned before, didn't believe in the talent that was on the field at the moment, because you had Tyreek Funderburg and, you had Josh Hayes playing at corner because and Zion was mostly healthy, but, there are situations where Zion wasn't available. We know that was the case with Jamel Dean. And it feels like it was kind of like Todd Bowles was daring Jason Light to be like, listen, if you're not going to give me depth, if you're not going to give me the guys, this is how I have to play defense. And in ways, it felt like that Todd Bowles won, not to spite Jason Light specifically, but to kind of make a point that we could be a great team if we handle this situation. And then it very much felt like Jason Light took care of it this offseason, whether it was Benjamin Morrison, whether it was Jacob Parrish. So to me, and of course, Tyke Smith moving to the safety position, going next to Antoine Winfield Jr. To me, I almost feel like the biggest upgrade for the Bucs and the defense specifically, which is what we're talking about, is going to be that secondary, whether it's just having the depth or having your playmakers back, because Antoine Winfield Jr., of course, only played, like 9 games last season?
Yeah. Yeah, I fully agree. And when you look at the secondary, those additions are huge, but there's already such a firm foundation with this Bucks defense. Between 2019 and 2024 last season, they had between 44 and 48 sacks each year. Last year, Matt, they tied for 6th with 46 sacks. So Bowles' defense, a big staple for them is getting after the quarterback and then also stopping the run. They have
Yeah.
always like a top 5 run defense. Those aren't the issues. The issues stem from the secondary. But as you mentioned, I mean, Ryan Neal isn't going to be out there at safety this year. It's going to be Tyke Smith. That is worlds better. He doesn't have to rely on the 4th and 5th stringers because, by all accounts, the Bucs defense did have some bad injury luck between Antoine Winfield Jr., Jordan Whitehead a couple of times there. Jamel Dean, he had battled through injuries yet again, but there was just so many to where now you have Benjamin Morrison, you have Jacob Parrish, and like Christian Izien still a part of it too, and he's a versatile piece should somebody get injured. So I think they can better weather the storm, and that's really going to elevate this defense.
Yeah, let me get your thoughts about Christian Izien going into his 3rd season. It's interesting with the depth at safety overall because Tyke, we like. Antoine, we love. And Tyke has that ability to get into the love category based on what he did. Christian Izien, to me, is an interesting guy because I think he's a lock to make the team. I mean, nothing's guaranteed with the Bucs, especially in the secondary. But now he becomes the de facto number 1 backup player. But he is an undrafted free agent. And so is pretty much everybody that's going to be in that secondary room, that safety room, excuse me. But at the same time, he might be best as a nickel as well. So where do you see him? Like as the top backup competing for the nickel spot? Is he able to do everything? Because he's kind of like a jack of all trades, master of none. But should he be a master at one of these spots and then the Bucs can figure it out from there?
Yeah, that's a great question in terms of Izien. And in kind of basketball terms, you could see him as a 6th man of sorts, right?
Yeah.
Because you have 2 corners, the nickel, the 2 safeties, that's 5. Izien could kind of do anything asked of Todd Bowles. He can dabble and play some safety. You even saw him play outside corner last year, but I think his best spot, Matt, would be nickel. So if Jacob Parrish maybe struggles early on and isn't ready for prime time yet, you can plug Izien there. And you saw when he was an undrafted free agent rookie in 2023, he was able to make plays and kind of hold down that spot. So I think in terms of being on the 53-man roster, he's too valuable to part with for the defense.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I think I'm more intrigued with the J.J. Roberts, Shiloh Sanders type of thing. Because Shiloh Sanders gets all of the attention, but he hasn't done a ton on the field. I'm not here to bash Shiloh Sanders. I'm a big fan of his YouTube channel. I think he's been a very, positive presence here in Tampa Bay. He, shook every media member's hand that one day during rookie minicamp. But J.J. Roberts was the guy that, got the quote unquote big money as far as undrafted free agents go. I think Shiloh is destined, in my opinion, for that practice squad, but I'm curious if he can make an impact in training camp because somebody needs to step out in that room for depth. Because I'm with you. I think Izien, they're going to end up kind of, moving him everywhere. And, Todd Bowles always says that he does cross-train guys, but you need a couple of people that you can just keep steadfast at the safety position. I don't know if it's going to be Kayvon Merriweather. I know, he's been on the team for the past couple of years. But to me, I want to see a little bit more of Shiloh and J.J. Roberts, particularly in training camp, where I think that's going to be one of the, not a top 5 storylines, but certainly, if you're filling out a boxing or a UFC card, you need those prelims and you need those early matches on the pay-per-view. And I think Shiloh and J.J. Roberts can be that. I'm curious if one guy can make the 53-man roster and the others on the practice squad, or maybe both will be, kind of destined for that practice squad.
I see a situation unfolding, like even if Kayvon Merriweather was the 4th safety and he wins that spot, like last year the Bucs kept Rashad Wisdom and Marcus Banks as like on the practice squad. It very well could be J.J. Roberts and Shiloh Sanders this year. And kind of going over the undrafted free agent signings, Matt, I was actually more excited about Roberts than Sanders, just because Roberts is more versatile. He has that 4.39 speed. He could play nickel. He could play safety. and he's a really good tackler. And I think there were some issues that he had that made him an undrafted free agent, of course, but I think his ceiling's a little bit higher. But Sanders, I mean, he's always going to be kind of a polarizing player just because of his dad and everything. But I also think that Sanders is going to make a mark. And you kind of saw for the Buffaloes that playmaking in spurts, but you need that to be consistent if he wants to battle and win a spot on the roster.
I think that's a microcosm for the entire defense. Like we talked about Anthony Nelson before. He's steady Eddie. He forces the fumble against Chuba Hubbard. But yeah, Shiloh is a guy that has made a moment, but can you do it like consistently throughout? I think that was an issue for Tampa Bay last year. Like Antoine Winfield Jr., for example, no knock on him that he got injured because sometimes there's, kind of like freak accidents and things like that. But he immediately comes back and, gets a scoop and score for a touchdown. This team from the Super Bowl, you see Sean Murphy-Bunting in there. Sean Murphy-Bunting had an interception in every playoff game except for the Super Bowl on that run. But even, in the Super Bowl, he may have not gotten an interception, but it was Antoine Winfield Jr. It was Devin White, who's not on the team. Week in and week out, the Bucs were consistently taking the football away. And that's why I kind of scratch my head looking at last year's team, because yes, the injuries were involved and everything like that. But this was a team that had 7 interceptions overall, 6 from the secondary. That was 28th in the entire league. And yet they were a top 10 team when it came to sacking the quarterback. They had 46 overall. That was tied for 7th in the league. And you would think that a team that was able to get to the quarterback so much, albeit in a non-traditional way, if you will, a team that could get to the quarterback so much would get so many interceptions off of it too. But that really just wasn't the case. So I guess that's why Todd Bowles all offseason was like ball hawks, ball hawks, ball hawks. Kind of like Beetlejuice, say it 3 times and get someone to do it. Maybe it'll be this guy, Benjamin Morrison. But it just feels like overall the consistency was not there, whether it was an injury thing. And I think this year, if the sack numbers still stay the same, I think we'll see kind of like what SR's bold take was, is that they'll double the interceptions. I could totally see that happening this year.
And I was just going to bring up Scott's take because in 2020, the defense had 15 interceptions and they won the Super Bowl. In 2021, they did one better. They had 17 interceptions. And you compare that to last season when they had just 7. So I think like Scott's on point in saying if they double the interception total, you're going to see that correlate to more wins and a deeper playoff run, because this defense needs to better support the offense. I mean, the offense is going to give them all the run support they need. They're going to average at least probably 25 points a game this season, but the defense needs to step it up. And I think back in 2023, they were still the 7th best scoring defense, only giving up 19 points a game for Dave Canales' offense. And it's not going to be that this season, because the offense that year only averaged 20 points per game. The offense is going to be better. The defense, if they get back to that level even, Matt, I think you're looking at a team that's going to make some serious noise.
Yeah, and I keep having that in the back of my head too, Adam. I think you make a really good point, is that we're not, certainly every Bucs fan and ourselves would love for the Bucs to be like, the Super Bowl winning team when they won their first Super Bowl in 2002, or another iteration of what it was in 2020. But it doesn't have to be that. It just has to be, I don't know, incrementally slightly better than what it was a season ago, because they do have the benefit of the offense being an absolute juggernaut. And I think you and I would both agree, we don't really see that changing with Josh Broussard. There might be, a little bit of a bump in the road early on as he kind of gets his feet wet, but the offense is way too talented to be a team that's, only going to average 20 points. I think like 25 is the floor per game, for the Bucs this upcoming season. So it's not like they have to be Superman, but they have had to be Superman before. As you mentioned, Dave Canales' first year. I would also go back to Tom Brady's last year. I know the Bucs they didn't have a winning record. They went 8-9, but they were winning games 20-17, 18-17, and all these crazy things. And I understand we live in a what have you done for me lately type of NFL world. But, when you see like our buddy Jay Retcher, I think you were on the show that day on Jay's show, when, he brought up the stat that like 75% of Bucs fans were not happy about the signing and the extension, of Todd Bowles. I think people are quick to forget how good the defense was in 2020 and 2021 in 2021 and 2022. You can go back to 2020 as well. But like 2022 and 2023 was very, very good, pretty solid in 2023, and one bad year in 2024. And everybody's kind of like waiting to jump ship. I don't think that was fair in terms of all the remarks and the criticism of Todd Bowles. He certainly has his fair share of criticism, but I think one bad season is not quick enough to, really pull the plug on a guy that has established so much in this organization.
And along those lines, Matt, I kind of want to pick your brain on this because you pulled up that picture of the Bucs defense back during the Super Bowl. And I think one missing element that the defense hasn't had in 2022 and 2023 was Devin White. Because when it was Devin White and Lavonte David in 2020 and 2021, that's when the Bucs defense was at their best. David had a perfect complement back when White was playing his best football. And that kind of begs the question, like we're talking about all these areas for optimism, whether that's the run defense, the sacks, the secondary getting a little bit better. What about inside linebacker? Does that concern you that it's Lavonte, who's 35 years old now, and then Servassier Dennis and Anthony Walker? I mean, who's going to emerge as a starter, and can they be better than last year?
Yeah, it's a good question. They definitely can be better than last year. I don't even think that's an argument. I think the problem, and I don't want to completely crap all over, the time that KJ Britt had here in Tampa Bay, but certainly KJ Britt was better off being a guy that was, first down, second down. He can hit hard. He can play the run pretty well, but he was abysmal in pass coverage. So we obviously know Lavonte David, LVD, is going to be the starting inside linebacker in one spot, but this is a huge, huge opportunity for Servassier Dennis to be the every game inside linebacker. And even if he's not, I'm okay with that. I like Deion Jones. We got to remember, he was only here in December. Like, Deion Jones has not been around for quite a while. And you talked about Devin White a moment ago. I think Anthony Walker Jr. can be that Devin White spark in terms of, I'm not going to compare his playing style to Devin White. Devin White has, speed for days, even with all the other faults that he's had. But Devin White was the vocal leader for the inside linebackers and really for the whole room. And I think the Bucs are still trying to find that vocal leader. I think maybe they'll get it with Yaya Diaby at outside linebacker. We'll talk about Yaya in a little bit. But Anthony Walker, just, when we got to speak to him in mandatory minicamp, the fact that he's already so tight with Lavonte going back to their days in Miami, I love what he said about that. Yeah, I'm done coaching for now because he used to coach with his dad, like coaching high school, but he's done with that. And just seeing him on the field, dancing, whooping it up, laughing, yelling, making all of his points. I think Anthony Walker Jr. has a chance to really be a catalyst for this team and maybe not be the every down guy, but provide a spark in a way that other guys haven't been able, particularly at the inside linebacker room. Now, Servassier Dennis is so important to all of this in the mix because if he can stay healthy, I'm not going to ask him to play for 17 games. I mean, this is a guy that has gotten hurt with very little playing time in 2 seasons in a row early on in the season, and then he's done, for the whole year. So I'm not going to rely on him for a full season. But if he can play 15 games, I mean, you and I watched him at practice as a rookie, the past 2 seasons as well. He's going into his 3rd season. This is a guy that is really good at pass coverage, and that covers a gigantic and enormous issue that this team had last year. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I bet on the opposing team's tight end to get over on their receiving yards because they were going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And that's because Servassier Dennis wasn't out there. Servassier Dennis can take the football away, he can cover, and he can blitz. And I still feel like that hasn't really been utilized, again, because he hasn't been starting. But he's going to bring a new element to this Bucs starting defense that we have not seen in a little bit. Remember, he got a sack on Jaden Daniels last year, one of the fastest quarterbacks in the league. He can chase down some guys, he can cover, and the Bucs didn't have that luxury for an entirety of a season. So what I'm curious about, too, with this inside linebacker room is, will it just be Lavonte David and Servassier Dennis? Say it's a 3 and out. Are they playing all 3 downs? Yeah. Do they platoon Lavonte David? I'm curious about that because he was a little bit of a weak link in pass coverage. Now, obviously, the positives and the benefits that Lavonte David brings to this team far outweigh any negative that he may have. But I kind of want to see a little bit of a linebacker by committee, whether that's keeping Lavonte on for 2 and taking him off for 1. Maybe it's an entire drive where Lavonte maybe isn't on the field. And again, you have to pick your moments. You want to do this like late in the first quarter. You don't want to do it in the fourth quarter with
Right.
the game on the line. But I feel like from inside linebacker 1 to inside linebacker 4, maybe 5, depending on if they keep one of these undrafted free agents, I think it's so much stronger than what it was a season ago. There's a big concern about all of these guys are in their 30s, except for Servassier Dennis, who might be the most injury prone about all of them. But I'm curious how they will shift guys in and out, if it's just going to be a two-man show with Levante and whoever wins the starting job, presumably Servassier Dennis, or if we will see a little bit of everyone. I guess that's kind of on Todd Bowles to figure out, but that certainly intrigues me a ton.
Yeah, I like the points that you made about Walker and Dennis. And I also kind of go back to the comment that Bowles made earlier this offseason when he was talking about the inside linebacker room being the deepest. And that kind of points to the last thing that you mentioned, like between inside linebackers 1 and 4, it really allows him to get creative to where maybe he can put Jones in a little bit more, or Walker and Dennis, they could platoon, kind of what you saw early last season, because early last season, it was working between KJ Britt and Servassier Dennis. You didn't want KJ Britt on the field 100% of the time, but you also wanted Dennis in there for coverage. And I think something else that you also mentioned was Dennis's ability to blitz. And back when he played at college at Pitt, he was a really good blitzer, and he pairs that with great coverage skills. So kind of going back to the point of Devin White being a good complement to Levante David, I think Servassier Dennis can do the same if he stays healthy. And if he doesn't, or if Anthony Walker plays, Walker does bring that energy. I remember it was the first day of mandatory minicamp when him and Deion Jones were on the sideline. They're holding their helmets. They were dancing. Like, you need that energy, and you need those vocal leaders on the defense, because this all goes back to, Matt, the defense in the playoffs lack that killer instinct. You need those veteran players that can really rise up and get the best out of everybody around them. And cutting off some dead weight and bringing in some new guys, I think they did that.
That's a really great point. And killer instinct has been another, buzzword for the Bucs this offseason. It's been a lot of ball hawks and things like that. But killer instinct is another big part of that for sure. I kind of feel like anytime we've got a long time without mentioning, Devin White. But I feel like when we do talk about Devin White, people are still tweaking like, oh, Devin White, like, are you kidding me? Whatever. But I think it is important to point out as well, I'm curious the production that Levante will have this year in particular, because for the last couple of years when Devin White was here, a big narrative, and it was true, was that Levante David had to really pick up the pieces and clean up the mess that Devin White created on the field, with him being, in the wrong spot, or just blitzing for the heck of it, even when he wasn't supposed to blitz, or if his blitz didn't get there, or if the coverage was wrong, whatever the case may be. And then last year, certainly, KJ Britt wasn't necessarily up to snuff. Then Britt got hurt, and JJ Russell was in there, and I like JJ Russell for the hustle, but again, like, he's not your ideal guy to play a ton of snaps. So if the Bucs can get that answer with Servassier, or a rotation with Anthony Walker, I think it might be the first year in a couple of seasons that Levante David can kind of focus on him without focusing on the other linebackers and really the rest of the defense. Because Levante had an interview with former Bucs Super Bowl winning coach John Gruden on one of the shows on YouTube when he's working for Barstool. And Levante wasn't always the linebacker that wore the green dot. And he actually said he doesn't like wearing the green dot, because when you're calling the plays, you got to know what everyone else is doing, because guys are subbing in and out. They may have not heard the play. They're like, wait, like, what's the call? What's the call? And when he wasn't wearing the green dot, he just needs to focus on himself, and certainly in like what the coverage is and what the offense is doing. And I'm sure Levante's fine with it now. He's a leader of this team, but just maybe taking a little bit less off of the plate, or more off of the plate for Levante David, so he has a little bit less to do. You can get like a vintage Levante David. You still see vintage Levante David from time to time, but I'm talking about for the longevity, and certainly for the postseason, because you brought up a great point. Bucs did not have a turnover. They did not force a punt in that playoff game, and that was a part of a big reason why they lost. We'll get to some comments from everybody too. David Arbuckle, this one's on topic, says, finger crossed that David has at least one more year in him, and Dennis actually can spend more time on the field than in rehab. Do you think this is Levante's last year? I know we've inferred it a lot, but do you think this is it, or do you think he's got two more?
I think this will be his last season, because you kind of saw last season him take a little bit of a step back. Now, he saved his best football for that Commanders game. I thought he was playing lights out until he left the game with the injury. But when you look at inside linebackers, I mean, 35 is a really tough age to keep playing. I mean,
Yeah.
Bucs fans saw it with Derek Brooks back in 2008 when he was kind of winding down his career. He just wasn't the same player. And I think Levante David this year is going to be a good linebacker, but to put him in the best spots, like defensively, the other guys around him need to step up, whether that's Sebastian Dennis. You won't see kind of the lapses of Devin White. And I don't think you'll see like not being able to play up the snuff like KJ Britt. I think Dennis will be somewhere in the middle to where he can shoulder more of the load. He just has to make sure his shoulder's all right, like he had that shoulder injury last season. But I think for David, this will be it for him.
A couple other people that are up to snuff are all the people over at Briar Greaves Insurance, which of course are the official sponsors of the Pewter Report podcast. If you're a longtime podcast listener, you probably remember the late, great Mark Cook talking about Briar Greaves Insurance. Pewter Report's Scott Reynolds has been a Briar Greaves customer for years, and there simply is not a better insurance company in the Tampa Bay area. Visit BriarGreavesInsurance.com to see for yourself. Briar Greaves Insurance is family-owned, and their main goal is helping people. They want to help people find the right insurance policy for you and your family. Whether it's home or auto, boating insurance, or business insurance, turn to Briar Greaves and find out why their personal touch and customer service sets them apart. The days of waiting on hold to speak with an insurance representative that you don't even know are over. With Briar Greaves Insurance, you'll have a relationship with your agent who can answer your questions and advise you on the best policies. As 2 recent hurricanes have shown all of us that live in the Tampa Bay area, and it is hurricane season coming up again, there is a cost to living in paradise. Briar Greaves can help you make sure that you have the right hurricane and flood insurance to make sure you and your home are protected. Visit BriarGreavesInsurance.com today. That's Briar, B-R-I-E-R, Greaves, G-R-I-E-V-E-S, or call their office today at 813-876-4166. One more time, that's 813-876-4166, and tell them that Pewter Report sent you. Also, Jason Light is an advocate and uses Briar Greaves Insurance. So if you love the Bucs and you love Jason Light, use what he uses, and that is Briar Greaves Insurance. Let's get to a couple of comments real quick. We'll start with, we'll talk about the edge rushers next. Yeah. Steven Stansfield says David Walker, 12 sacks. We'll get to some of these comments too. What's up with Desmond? Talking about Desmond Watson. Carson Imber says, we just need to be able to cover the middle of the field. I think that answers a ton with the inside linebackers. I think if they cover up that maybe eliminates 25% of the issue for the Bucs on defense.
Man, it would have eliminated last year against the Falcons when Kyle Pitts, he was catching touchdowns across the middle. I think there was that one game he had 2 touchdowns. And just, again, the tight ends week in and week out having success. And in turn, that just giving up so many passing yards for the defense. I think that all kind of goes together. Like, if the inside linebackers do their part up the middle, it's going to make things so much easier.
Donald Podzkowski says, Shiloh might be worth keeping for the jersey sales alone. I think, okay, like if Jason Light, Mike Greenberg, Jackie Davidson, Mike Beal, everyone, when they're in the war room discussing about who they're going to keep, they're not going, oh, well, Shiloh's viral. Let's keep him on the team for that. But I will say kudos to the Bucs social media team and PR staff and stuff like that, because they have leaned into Shiloh's YouTube. And, there was the video where he answered a fan question of like, who's the toughest receiver that he's guarded in practice? He's like, bro, they have Mike Evans, But I think they're doing it in a fun, positive way. And Capri Primal says, if the Bucs defense was just slightly better, the Bucs would have won a number of more games. I think that's true too, Adam. I mean, they probably beat Atlanta twice. That's 12 wins right then and there. I think, again, if the Bucs can just tweak a couple of things on the defensive side, the number 1 seed is well within the reach of this unit.
Yeah, I fully agree. And going back to that comment, you mentioned the Falcons games. I also kind of think of that Chiefs game, right? Like if Todd Bowles, like there's a couple issues with that. Like if Todd Bowles would have managed better down at the end, but had the defense also got more stops, I think that you would have saw that game turning in the Bucs' favor. And then you're looking at 13 wins, potentially a number 1 seed. And then in the playoffs, Matt, they only lost to the Commanders by 3 points. Mm-hmm. And then what did the Commanders do? They beat the Lions like in a blowout. So like, I don't know. I think that the Bucs have all the talent to be a number 1 seed, but it again comes down to the defense. Can they be deadly again?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's that's something that we're talking about now on the show, but we won't really have an answer until a couple of games into the season. By the way, shout out to Rendax. Rendax Thinking says, does anyone in the chat remember the fishing store that sponsored this podcast the first year? Yeah, that was T.A. Mahoney's. The late great Mark Cook had a great bit about firing off a flare gun and things like that, which is almost fitting right now because there's going to be fireworks tomorrow, 4th of July, which we hope everyone has a great 4th of July. But that made me think of that, and RIP Mark Cook. So thanks for bringing that up, Ren. Good to see that. Also, Nathan Elliott said, gave Pewter Report and Briar Greaves a shout-out during the J.P. Peterson show earlier today. Thanks for doing that, Nathan. Thanks to JP for filling in yesterday. It was the return of Scott, and JP was on the show. So that was all fine and dandy as well. Yeah, T.A. Mahoney's. That was a funny bit from Mark Cook, who we miss a lot. By the way, I before was driving by and saw Mahoney Middle School. So shout out to Mahoney Middle School over in Portland, Maine. Anyway, back to what we're talking about on this show. The Bucs and their defense, edge rushers specifically. Now, there was a comment, David Walker, 12 sacks. I don't know if David Walker is going to get 12 sacks, but that's because he's got a guy like Hassan Reddick and Yaya Diaby that will be starting at outside linebacker. Of course, you got Steady Eddie, Anthony Nelson in the mix as well. A very curious case of Chris Braswell going into this year. So, Adam, give me your thoughts on the outlook of the Bucs at outside linebacker, particularly Yaya and Hassan Reddick, because while I mentioned before the number of sacks that the Bucs had, a lot of it was blitzing and all these different things. Of course, Vita Vea and Kalijah Cansey, who we'll talk about. But the edge rushers, as much as the secondary needs to pick it up, I think edge rushers might be my second vote of the group that really needs to take that next step forward.
Yeah, and the thing is, I think that the edge rushers can take the next step forward this year. I know we mentioned a little bit earlier in the show that the defense has always found a way to get sacks, and Todd Bowles will always manufacture ways to get pressure. But it starts with Yaya Diaby converting those pressures that he had last season. Like, he had, the 9th most pressures in football into sacks. He can do it because he gets after the quarterback. He's right in the vicinity, but the quarterback just got away last year. I don't think you're going to see that as much this year. I think that he will reach a double-digit sack threshold. And when you look at Hassan Reddick, his last year between getting traded to the Jets, not playing for him, and then playing for him, he's in a stable environment before. And we kind of talked about Bowles and what does he bring as a head coach. He brings that stability. And I think that's going to be good for Hassan Reddick entering this prove-it season for him because he has the resume of being a really elite pass rusher. And last year you saw the defense it was sacks by committee. I think at least 6 players had 4 sacks. It's going to be more of a 1-2 punch with Diaby and Reddick this year. And kind of going back to that comment about David Walker, that was a bold take thinking that he's going to get 12 sacks. I think he's going to have a role more of a number 3 pass rusher. But Matt, I'm really excited to see what Chris Braswell can do because you see pass rushers, they don't always have the best first year. Nolan Smith of the Eagles comes to mind, where I think he only had 1 sack. But then the next year, he took that jump. Braswell was a 2nd-round pick last year. Fans kind of forgot about him amongst the rookies because he had 4 become starters. But if Braswell, maybe he gets 5 sacks. And then Steady Eddie, Anthony Nelson, he's on hand. I think that there's just so much talent at the outside linebacker position and so much potential that can be realized that it could be a 50-sack defense next season.
Yeah, while they were underachieving, there's no doubt that they are pretty deep. Now, Chris Braswell is kind of a part of that of what you'll get from him. But I think if you look at the trajectory of his overall, college career, he played in Alabama. He wasn't the top dude at Alabama all of the time. He had to work and scratch and claw and have to wait on the bench, and then eventually became a starter of obviously a top premier SEC defense. So he kind of understands, when I say the playbook, I don't mean specifically the Bucs defensive system.
Yeah.
The overall playbook of what you got to do to eventually, get your moment in the sun. And I also think, again, not trying to be negative towards guys that aren't here anymore, kick them out while they're out the door, but they played Joe Tryon-Shoyinka too much last year, especially at the end of the year, where it should have been Chris Braswell getting more opportunities. And whether that was a Todd Bowles thing, actually it was a Todd Bowles thing because Jason Light didn't re-sign him. But that kind of goes back to some of the issues that we've had with Todd Bowles of like when to play guys, when not to play guys, when to move a starter, when not to. But he doesn't have that luxury this year. So the only reason that Chris Braswell wouldn't be playing is if David Walker just goes absolutely insane in training camp. Now, we didn't see him for mandatory minicamp, but Todd Bowles went out of his way to say that, David Walker was one of the top guys during rookie minicamp and some of the OTAs as well. He's got a quick first step, and he reminds me a little bit of James Harrison with the way that he's like overlooked, big time, like upper body and everything like that. I don't necessarily know if he has that killer instinct the way that James Harrison does, because James Harrison would, look right through you and kind of saw you in half the way that Superman can do with the beam, even though I'm a Team Batman guy. But we saw a 4th round pick explode onto the scene with the Bucs last year with Bucky Irving. Hopefully, David Walker can be that guy this time around. I'm also curious, how do you feel? What does your gut tell you? Do you think we see one Bucs outside linebacker with like 12 or 14 sacks and is kind of the leader of the group? Or do you think we get no outside linebackers with 10 sacks, but you get Yaya 8, Hassan 8, David Walker 5, Anthony Nelson 4, and Braswell, we'll put him at like 5 as well. And it's the committee more than kind of the top dog.
I see it like that's a great question. I kind of see it being the committee again, because even when the Bucs defense was at its best 5 years ago, you saw JPP and Shaq Barrett. There was one season when they each had 9 sacks, 8.5 sacks, and the defense was still thriving because at the end, like, you want to see really good sack numbers, but you don't want there to be an anomaly either, where one guy has 14, the next guy has 5. You want to see like a bunch of guys competing to get after the quarterback. And I think that's what's going to be the case this year, because not only do you have to account for 2 talented starting edge rushers and then all the backups, but there's a guy named Kalijah Kancey. He's pretty good. He's a really good pass rushing defensive tackle. And then Vita Vea. So you have to throw them in the mix too and say, what's not to say Kancey doesn't get double-digit sacks. Vita Vea doesn't get 6 or 7 sacks again. I think just based on the talent level, there isn't going to be one guy that really steals the show, but it's going to be a bunch of guys that star in it.
Yeah, I do want to talk about Vita Vea and Kalijah Kancey, because I agree with you. Like, Kalijah Kancey specifically could be the guy to get 18 sacks or whatever he wants to get this year, and he certainly has that goal in mind. I just want to stick with Hassan Reddick for just a moment, because I think it's such an intriguing situation, Adam, when we look at all the other edge rushers that are trying to become available. It was Myles Garrett, earlier in the spring, and then he gets the big contract to stay with the Cleveland Browns. And then we're watching it in full time right now. TJ Watt might not be back with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He wants a gigantic contract. Will he get traded? And then there's the Trey Hendrickson thing that has been going on since before the draft started. And so I say all of this because, understandably, Bucs fans want to talk about, should the Bucs go after TJ Watt or Trey Hendrickson and things like that. But they got Hassan Reddick. They get him for a solid deal compared to what all these other guys are getting paid. It's going to be $12 million, maybe $14 million if he hits all these incentives. But I find it such an intriguing spot, because either Hassan Reddick has a great year, and then the Bucs have to decide whether or not to pay him. He has a bad year, and he's out the door, or he gets this like plateau number, and then it's like, well, what do? Do you bring him back another season, or do you not? And that's why I like that Tampa Bay is in this situation, because we're going to learn a lot about Chris Braswell this year. You still got Yaya Diaby. We're going to learn a lot about Yaya in terms of, can he be a number 1 outside linebacker? And the Bucs are kind of sitting on, I don't want to say on easy street, but they have a pretty get out of jail free card with Hassan Reddick, where some of these other teams are going to have to pony up millions and millions and millions of dollars for essentially aging edge rushers, where the Bucs kind of skate out underneath. So I hope Hassan Reddick has a great year. The Bucs are willing to pay him, and he chooses the Bucs again due to loyalty and taking a chance on him versus, bringing in someone from the outside and having to pay them more for more years than it could, tie you up for several seasons.
Yeah. And with Reddick, it's such an interesting situation, because if he does perform well, Matt, and he gets 18 to 20 million a year on like a 2 or 3 year deal, like the Bucs also have to account for a new extension for Diaby, all the 2022 draft picks that still need money. And then you mentioned Diaby, Mauk, like you don't want to overpay everybody, but you want to keep a lot of the draft picks that have formed the foundation of this team around. And I think Reddick, if he outperforms this season, he's going to command so much money to where Jason Light's hands might be tied, because you want to keep the production, but you also don't want to overpay when there's so many other needs to address. But with like Khalil Mack, I think he got like 20 million in free agency this year. Like the Bucs got a real good bargain in Reddick. Now he just has to go out there and show it. And like he's in the best environment where he can. And the expectations aren't for him to be the number one pass rusher, because you kind of want to see Diaby take that step, but he very well could emerge as that.
You don't want to overpay for, some aging edge rushers. You don't really want to overpay on anything. You want to manage your money the right way. So the best people to work with when it comes to managing your money is Immuni Financial. They have proudly been serving clients across the country since 1980. They can help you with a number of different things like advisory services, legacy and retirement planning, insurance services, annuities, sales and trading, and so much more. If your kid wants to go to college, you could set up a college account for them as well through Immuni Financial. And the cool thing is, you've seen with the video before, they got places in Colorado, they got places in Tampa Bay, but they got it all over the continental United States. You can be in Maine, you can be in Montana, Idaho. I always like to say Oklahoma, where obviously Baker Mayfield played his college football, Kansas as well. Nevada, all over the place. Check out Immuni Financial. Give them a call. They'll give you a free consultation. So it's absolutely free. Why not give it a shot? And shout out to our friends over at Immuni Financial. Also, want to give a shout out to our Pewter Platinum members. Sorry, I'm all over the place. I'm in vacation mode. It's
right.
1 day away from the 4th of July. But thank you to our Pewter Platinum members: Scott Federico, Rachel Gordon, Noah Parr, Scotty J, Dave Anderson, Piso813, Ash Fishpool, Joel Elrican, Sam, John Dale Morris, Zach Brannigan, RP89, Eric McMillan, Connor for Reals, Kevin Thomas, Mario Thomas, Zach Jarvis, Leighton Carter, The Guy is Gifted, and Brandon Riley. Thank you all so much for your support of PewterReport.com. We really, really appreciate it. No Pewter Insider tomorrow because it is the 4th of July, but we will be counting down the days until the next one on the following Friday. So we appreciate all of that. If you want to support PewterReport.com, think about becoming a Pewter Report YouTube channel member. We had an awesome time at Walk-Ons a couple weeks ago with our Platinum members. Zion McCollum was there, as was Assistant General Manager Mike Greenberg. So we had a great time. They signed autographs for everyone, took pictures, chatted about the Bucs, gave some inside stories, especially with Greenberg and his time over there. So we have different levels of membership: Pewter People member, Pewter Pro member, Pewter Premier member, and Pewter Platinum member, with different benefits for each level. So yeah, please consider it. We appreciate everyone's support. And we'll put that on the screen for one more moment so you can take a look and read at some of the benefits of being a member. And thank you, everyone that is a subscriber and a YouTube channel member of Pewter Report TV. One other comment I want to get to, a couple, starting with James Clawberg, who's going back to that playoff game that Tampa Bay lost. Says offense was choking games away in the fourth quarter and everybody just blamed the defense. I don't necessarily feel like that was the case. I think a lot of games, the Bucs offense had big leads.
Yeah.
And then the defense was the ones letting the other team back into it. Now, if you want to talk about the Commanders game specifically, I mean, really all season long, Adam, the Bucs offense had one bad performance, and that was against the Denver Broncos.
Yep.
Outside of that, like eventually at some point, the defense has to pick it up and bail out the offense. It's a shame that Graham Barton snapped it too early and they, didn't go for it on fourth down. But the game was tied and the ball was in their hands, the defense's hands, to get a stop and get the ball back to the offense. And they didn't get it done then. So I understand the frustration with how it ended for the offense in that playoff game. But they did so many things right the entire season that I don't think they should be blamed for how the season ended.
Not at all. And you kind of look at, it's two sides, right? The defense with their injuries, they couldn't really overcome it. But you look at the offense and the injuries that they had at wide receiver, right? When Mike Evans and Chris Godwin went down, what did the offense do? They still found ways to score. Like you saw in the 49ers game, they still put up 20. In the Chiefs game, they put up 24. They still found ways to execute the game plan. And I think that is what has really held the defense back, is executing Todd Bowles' game plan. And that comes from whether that's like schematic stagnation, right? Where they're doing the same things, expecting like different results. Like you need to kind of change some things. And when you look at the offense, like outside of that Broncos game, and you can kind of point to the Commanders game where they only scored 20 points, but it's like they kept them in the game every other week of the season. So you can't really blame it on the offense when the offense was firing on all cylinders. Mayfield was throwing touchdowns. The running game was elite. The offensive line, they're not the ones to blame here.
I'm in full agreement. Certainly can't blame Kalijah Kancey and Vita Vea, who are two absolute stalwarts for this team. It's funny, Vita Vea, like his whole career, he's had some cool dynamic duos going from Ndamukong Suh and, now Kalijah Kancey. And, that group will continue this year. You got Greg Gaines in the mix as nose tackle, Elijah Roberts, friend of the program. I'm excited about him with his versatility because, usually we see the Bucs draft an offensive player, a tackle, and move him into guard, but they're doing the reverse of this now with an edge rusher where he played at SMU and a little bit at Miami, but mostly SMU. And then they're moving him inside, but it starts and ends. We'll see with Logan Hall as well. We've spoken a lot about him this week, but it starts and ends with Vita Vea and Kalijah Kancey. And man, if Kalijah Kancey can just freaking play in the first month of the season, I think that will open up a lot of doors and windows for this team as well. I barely even want to see Kalijah Kancey during training camp. I understand you got to get in football shape and everything like that, but he keeps getting hurt in training camp and preseason, early in the season, and we've been robbed of seeing him in the month of September, really. I mean, to see what he did last year with all of the sacks, if he can play a full season, I don't know if he can get the sack leader, but he could be the closest thing to Warren Sapp in terms of getting to the quarterback as a defensive tackle.
And I know the subject of one of the Pewter Report podcasts earlier this week was talking about some Bucs X factors.
Yeah.
And I've kind of thought about it throughout the show. And the first one that comes to mind is Kalijah Kancey, because if he does stay healthy, and man, just bubble wrap his calves and make sure that he can make it through training camp. Because if he does, and he plays a full 17-game season, there is no reason that this man cannot be a double-digit sacker. You saw at the end of last year, he started to get on a roll. He was getting a sack almost every game after he came back from injury. And I just think he's so dynamic. And for a defensive tackle to be built like him and like just have that explosion off the snap, playing next to Vita Vea does so much for him and really opens up lanes to get after the quarterback. So I look at Kalijah Kancey as being the X factor for this defense, because without Aaron Donald taking all the Pro Bowl honors, it very well could open up for Kancey, and he could get the recognition that really a breakout season would deserve.
And I hope that the star of Vita Vea is able to expand further where the spotlight also goes on Kalijah Kancey, because Vita Vea has been one of the representatives of the Bucs perennially in the Pro Bowl throughout the past couple seasons. So people are well aware of what Vita Vea can do. But I think football fans that aren't watching the Bucs every single week, certainly Bucs fans are aware of what Kalijah Kancey does. But the outside world in the NFL, I believe, and especially if he can play on Monday night against the Houston Texans in week 2, I think they're starting to really get what Kalijah Kancey is all about. Because it's funny, we've seen Kalijah without his helmet and shoulder pads on. We've seen him, just walking around like a regular human being. And I'm not blown away. I mean, he is an undersized guy, but I'm not blown away by the physical features of Kalijah Kancey, the way that, when you see Vita Vea or Tristan Wirfs and things like that, like they are gargantuan human beings. And it's like, I can't believe we are all citizens, from the same species, really. But then he just gets into the game and he's in the backfield in 2.5 seconds. Like, he's one of the guys that can truly take over a game for the Bucs. And we've at least seen it over the last 2 years. And just how quick he can move. I hope teams start giving him more attention, and then that can open up things for Vita Vea, because Kalijah relies on his speed, but Vita Vea just has that God-given strength where he can.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw him take advantage. It was a preseason game, but remember when they played the Dolphins and he just
Jack
drove
Driscoll
back.
Was a center.
Yeah, he drove that center back like what felt like 100 yards. Like, it was ridiculous. And he can do that really against anybody in the league, and especially now that Frank Ragnow isn't, going to be playing center for the Lions. I hope with Hassan Reddick on the outside and then Kalijah Kancey on the inside, I hope they give teams fits where somehow Vita Vea slips through the cracks and is able to, keep amassing all of these great backfield moments against the quarterback, stopping the run. Because yes, stopping the run is so important. You brought that up earlier in the show. Vita Vea has always been at the forefront of that, but the past 2 or 3 years, he's really picked it up as a pass rusher, led the team in sacks a couple of seasons ago. So if he could ever get a one-on-one opportunity, I think it's, absolute curtains and lights out for, whatever team they're going against.
Yeah, and I do want to say about Cansey, though, I think for him to take the next step, not only does he need to continue to show his pass rushing chops, but be a little bit better in run defense. And I think that's an area where, like, if Vita Vea were to ever miss a couple of games, he kind of disappears in that regard because he doesn't have, like, a big complement next to him. So you kind of want to see Cansey take that next step in run defense. But if you know Bowles, the defense is going to have a really good run defense because, like, it's just been a staple. I think they only have given up like 98 yards a game or something like that. So just really stout defense, and that interior pass rush opens up the outside pass rush, which in turn kind of gives like the secondary more chances to make plays.
Well, let me tell you, I wish I could run on over to Walk-Ons and have some of their fantastic food and drinks. They got happy hour throughout the weeks. Tuesday is the big day to go because they got happy hour all day plus $5 Tito's. You can still go today. It's from 3 to 6 and then 9 until close. The food is fantastic. The drinks are awesome. There's a wide range of selection. So we love Walk-Ons for several reasons. There are 3 in the Tampa Bay area, 1 over in Lakeland, another in Wesley Chapel, and a 3rd in Midtown Tampa, where we had our meetup with our Pewter Platinum members. And it's not far from Raymond James Stadium either. So eat like a winner and drink like a champ over at Walk-Ons. Before we close out the show, there were 2 more comments I want to get to. One from Realtor David Zussman, who says, we need to send a 3rd-round pick and Trey Palmer for Nick Herbig after the Steelers re-sign Watts. I'm a fan of Nick Herbig.
Yeah.
He's done some good stuff. Again, kind of behind the scenes because TJ Watt gets all of the fanfare, and understandably so. He dominates year in and year out. I don't know about a 3rd-round pick. Again, Jason Light loves his draft picks. I think a 5th pick, I think Jason Light should counter with a 5th pick and settle on a 4th pick. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, last year's 3rd-rounders were Tyke Smith and Jalen McMillan. So you don't want to give up that much, but with Herbig, he's a really athletic pass rusher. And with Watts and Highsmith as their top 2 guys, like, he's kind of been in the back seat a little bit, where you could see Herbig, if he were to come to Tampa Bay, like, sit behind Reddick and Diaby, but then next season maybe be a starter.
Yeah, and then with their depth at wide receiver, I don't think there's anything you're really losing with Trey Palmer, where Pittsburgh certainly needs wide receivers. So yeah, I mean, that'd be interesting. I don't know if we'll see it, but I certainly appreciate the thought process behind it. And this last one from Bat W says, if Reddick works, it will make the whole defense better. I agree wholeheartedly because Reddick working means he's getting the 12 sacks that I was talking about earlier. That means he's after the quarterback every single play in any big 3rd down situation, and it's going to be a nightmare for the opposing team, especially if they have to pass the ball. So if Hassan Reddick turns into the Hassan Reddick that he was 2 seasons ago, then I think the Bucs have a top 5 defense in this league.
Yeah, I agree. And just kind of to wrap up our thoughts a little bit when talking about, like, the Bucs defense being deadly again, there are, like, a lot of ifs when it comes to this defense. Like, if Antoine Winfield Jr. has a bounce back season, if Levante David could, like, continue to be productive during his age 35 season. But I think what you are going to see this season is it's going to be better than last year, just based on better health and better depth. And I think for the defense to really get to the next level, you're going to need guys like Reddick and Cansey and Antoine Winfield Jr. to, like, pick up some slack and then also be veteran leaders on this defense. Because I think that's kind of what the defense has missed, is when you have, like, Joe Tryon-Shoyinka and KJ Britt, like, they're not really playing up to par and they're expected to kind of be leaders and starters. You're not going to see this team perform. But now that the defense is kind of settled in and you have better players, you're going to see Bowles being more creative, which is going to make the defense deadly.
And I think they have more answers if something does have to happen to one of their top guys, which they didn't have those answers this last year, but they do this year. So yeah, there's no doubt hopefully everyone stays healthy. I'm not expecting that just because it's football and that hardly ever happens, but
Yeah.
they can survive a couple of long-term injuries to some of their best players based on, what they did this offseason. But if everyone does play to their potential, it is a lot of ifs, as you just mentioned. They have the talent, though, is essentially what the theme is for this episode. They have the talent. They are good enough, but they're good enough on paper. They got to go out and prove it. So we'll be very exciting to see what the defense can do this year. More sacks, more interceptions, more forced fumbles, and that'll lead to a lot of wins for this team. So that's going to do it for us on today's show. If you're not already doing so, please follow us on all of our social media on X, Facebook, and Instagram. We are at Pewter Report, and our YouTube channel is Pewter Report TV. Please like and subscribe. Leave a comment on this video below. Tell us who you are most excited about on the defensive side of the football for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is also our last episode of the week. No Pewter Insider tomorrow because it is the 4th of July. So happy 4th of July, everybody. Hope you all have a fantastic time. Have a great weekend. Be safe, but have fun as well. So for Adams Levon, I'm Matt Matera saying thanks, everybody, for watching. Have a great weekend. Happy 4th of July, and we will see you soon for another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Enjoy the fireworks. Out.
Out.